Hi. What if Jane Seymour, third wife of King Henry VIII, had given birth to a daughter on the 12th of October 1537? What would have happened if Edward VI had never been born? Thank you to my channel member Katie Wickland for this question, and thank you so much, Katie, for your support with this channel. Katie said, "I've recently wondered what would have happened to the succession if Jane Seymour had died giving birth to a daughter and not a son, but the rest of history would remain the same. Henry would have married the same 3 other women but had no more children. Do you think Jane's daughter would have been named heir since she probably couldn't be declared illegitimate? Or do you think he would have made Mary heir since she was older? Or could he have named someone else entirely?" That's today's what if, and it's a great one. But let's set the scene first of all. It's October 1537, and Queen Jane is just about to go into labour. Henry VIII has 2 surviving children at this stage, and they're both daughters. Mary, who was born in 1516, and who was the daughter of Henry by his first wife Catherine of Aragon, and Elizabeth, who was born in 1533, and who was the daughter of Henry by his second wife Anne Boleyn. Both of these daughters had been made illegitimate by Acts of Parliament at the King's request, following the annulments of his marriages to their mothers. The annulments didn't necessarily mean that the girls were illegitimate. They could have been deemed to have been conceived in good faith. But Henry wanted them made illegitimate and removed from the line of succession. He wanted only the children he was hoping to have with his true wife, Jane Seymour, to be legitimate heirs to the throne. Henry had had 2 sons too. Henry, Duke of Cornwall, born to Catherine of Aragon in 1511, and Henry Fitzroy, Duke of Richmond and Somerset, born to Henry's mistress, Elizabeth Blunt, in 1519. But the little Duke of Cornwall had died when he was 52 days old, and Fitzroy had died when he was 17. It had appeared at one point that the king might be considering making Fitzroy, his illegitimate but acknowledged son, legitimate. And it was definitely something that Catherine feared. But the boy died young. So, in early October 1537, Henry VIII did not have any legitimate children, and the succession was not secure. He badly needed a son. In reality, Jane gave birth to a healthy baby boy before dying 12 days later, probably of an infection. You can imagine Henry VIII's delight and relief at the birth of this boy, although that would have been tainted by grief over Jane's death. This boy would inherit the throne as King Edward VI in 1547 at the age of 9. The Tudor line had been secured and the throne was passed on without challenge or trouble. But what would have happened if Jane's baby had been a girl? And let's call her Margaret, naming her after her great-grandmother, Lady Margaret Beaufort, and her aunt, Margaret Tudor. And Katie needs me, in my what-ifing, to have everything else the same, to leave everything else alone. So Henry VIII still marries Anne of Cleves, then Catherine Howard, and then Catherine Parr. He also doesn't have any more children, no trying to get a mistress pregnant in his panic to secure the throne, no changing his mind about Catherine Parr when he realises she's had 2 childless marriages and so could perhaps have problems conceiving. No, everything else is to stay the same. We get to the 28th of January 1547. Henry VIII dies, and he has one legitimate child, Margaret. She is his named heir, followed by her half-sisters Mary and Elizabeth, and he's appointed a regency council of equals to help her reign, just as he did with Edward, so I'm keeping everything the same. Well, I think Edward Seymour, as Margaret's uncle, would still have taken charge and made himself Lord Protector. But I think he would have had a fight on his hands. I think there would have been a succession crisis. Just as in 1553, Mary would have seen herself as her father's rightful heir, as her father's eldest child. There was no boy with precedence, only girls. Mary might have submitted to her father in 1536, agreeing to accept her status as illegitimate, but she definitely still viewed herself as legitimate. And I think Mary would have been successful in her bid for the throne. She was 30. Her mother had ensured that she'd had an education fit for a ruler. The English people knew her and would have seen her as the legitimate heir. And I'm sure she would have rallied just as much support, if not more, in 1547 as she did in 1553. A child monarch made a country insecure. A queen wasn't ideal, but it was better than a 9-year-old queen. So Mary would have become queen, I believe, and she would have stopped the Reformation in its tracks. She probably would still have married Philip of Spain. As he was available at that point, he'd been widowed in 1545. And marrying him 6 or so years earlier than she did in reality may well have given her the chance to have children by him. She would have been 31, 32 at their marriage instead of 38. We'd have had 11 years of Mary without the Protestant legislation of Edward VI's reign, and perhaps Mary would have passed the throne on to her child instead of Elizabeth. So I think Mary would have taken the throne from Margaret and then kept her little half-sister close at court and perhaps arranged a good diplomatic marriage match for her. Other what-if alternatives include Margaret becoming queen and perhaps already being betrothed to a foreign prince when her father died and then marrying him and ruling with him, or having a marriage arranged for her by Edward Seymour or John Dudley, a foreign match, or perhaps a Seymour or Dudley match. Perhaps Margaret would have ended up marrying Robert Dudley. And what would have happened if she died young in 1553? Well, I expect the same as when Edward died, unless her marriage had somehow tied England to another country and her husband took control. There are so many different strands to this, aren't there? And I'm sure you'll think of something I haven't. So please, please, please do share your views and your ideas in the comments. And of course, if you've enjoyed this what-ifing, then you can like this video and please subscribe to this channel as well. It helps others to find my work. Thank you for joining me. Take care and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.